Now?
Hey everyone, are we good? Can everyone hear me?
Yes. The question is whether you can hear us.
Just give me 1 second, I'll wait for confirmation here. Yeah, we're good. Okay, so thanks everyone. I appreciate you being here for this. I like to choose titles for talks that are somewhat uninformative, really, in a lot of ways. I know that the title doesn't give you much to go on here. However, so a little bit about me. I do work for Jarod. I'm a solutions consultant there. I've been with the company for about 5 years. And a little bit of background, a little more background. I came into the tech space and specifically the content space from academia. So I've been a grad student for a long time, and I'm still a grad student, and I'm trying to wrap that up. It's going much slower than I had hoped it would, but I'm still making progress, which is great. Today we're going to go through. I'm going to start off and I'm going to give you guys kind of an introduction to theoretical virtues. That sounds maybe really off topic, but it's really sets the stage for what I think is this content conundrum that we all kind of face. Whether we have fully acknowledged it or not, it's there. And so I'm going to start off by talking about 2 theoretical virtues, and then state kind of a problem that comes along with those. There's something built into them. And then I'll give you kind of a generalization and some examples. So that problem will generalize most everywhere. So the problem between these 2 particular virtues. Then I'll state what the actual content conundrum is itself and how I think we can overcome it. And really why in the future, I think it's actually, it works out in all of our content creators' benefits at this point, and why this is actually can turn out to be a really good thing for us. So ultimately, the goal of this presentation is to make the case that as content creators, anyone working in the content space, whether that's somebody that is building a tool designed to help generate content, or whether those are the actual creators using the tools, that this is an issue we need to face head on if, in fact, we want to deliver high quality content experiences, which, of course, I'm just going to take it for granted that we do. Okay, so that's an agenda. So let's get started. There we go. So as the title indicates, we're going to talk about power and simplicity. So these are the 2 theoretical virtues that I really want to focus on here. Power, roughly speaking, is just the ability of a theory to explain the data. Whether that's a scientific theory, whether that is a philosophical theory, that's my background, which is also why this talk is going to be very high level. I probably should have said that from the beginning. It's a very high level talk. There aren't going to be a whole lot of nitty gritty details in here. So it's going to be all theory based and idea focused. But really, in essence, with power, what we're after is making sure that a theory has the relevant capacity to explain all the phenomena that we see. If a theory doesn't have the explanatory resources to explain the phenomena, then it's not a good theory. Since, after all, we want our theories to be able to explain phenomena. That's what they do. That's why we build them. The second one is simplicity. So again, these are really not really great definitions. They're not really, really well formulated, but they give you the rough idea. So fewer axioms and entities in a theory. The basic idea that really drives the idea that simplicity is a theoretical virtue is elegance. Now, don't ask me to define what elegance means, but I think it has something to do with, it's a combination of humans' ability to understand things, and we tend to gravitate towards simpler theories because simpler theories are easier for us to understand, and we like that. Again, I'll explain how this plays out in non-theories in a bit. But something we tend to say about theories is that simpler ones are more elegant than complex theories. And I think that's really tied to our ability to understand them. You'll often hear the refrain about simpler theories being more elegant in domains like fundamental physics, philosophy, and you even get it in some of the lower level sciences like biology. But the main point is that a simpler theory has fewer axioms or basic principles that are built into it from which we can derive all of the explanations that we might need. Yeah. Okay, so really, really simple. The idea itself is pretty simple. Powerful theories do a lot, and simple theories are elegant. Here's a quick example for you of how this might work. So I'm going to give you what I take to be a more powerful theory, and just ask yourself if you think this is a good theory. So I use a Mac, and I have one of the Macs that has the touch bar at the top. If I let my computer sit and I don't touch it for about 5 to 7 minutes, but I don't let it go to sleep either, then that touch bar will start flashing. It looks like a strobe light. It's terribly distracting if I'm on a call or giving a presentation and I don't advance slides fast enough, it can start to flash, and it's really distracting. So here's my theory. My touch bar flashes and I have to explain that. So the theory goes something like this. Well, I've got these little monsters in my computer. They're what carry all of the electrons around, and they move them throughout the computer to make the circuits work. Ultimately, they're what are carrying the electricity in the computer that are turning circuits on and off, and they make the whole thing work. And so these little monsters are cool. They make my computer function. But if I give them too much of a break, they start to play. And when they play, what they do is they've got a set of little tiny trampolines, and those trampolines, they jump on them. And so if I'm not giving them inputs with my keyboard or with my mouse, then they play, they take a break. And when they do that, they jump on their trampolines. And since they carry all the electricity, all the electrons on their heads, and all of their trampolines are below my touch bar, it flashes. That theory might sound crazy, and it is, but it explains all the data. And what's really interesting about it is I could use those little monsters to explain lots of other really interesting things too. There are all kinds of things that I could do with my computer or behaviors of my computer that I could use those little monsters to explain. And some of those might be explanations for behaviors in my computer that you might think physics can't explain. But really, the problem with the theory is that those little playful monsters are in there. Well, I guess I should point out, there are more things in that theory. I have electrons in there. It's built into the theory. So I get all of the electron behavior, and I can get some of the fundamental physics stuff built in there, in addition to the little monsters. So I have this extra postulate, which is these monsters. And those, as lovable as they are, we don't need them in that theory. And so we cut them out. We don't need little monsters to explain why the touch bar flashes. We know that circuits malfunction, and when they malfunction, they can get these like high doses of input like that, and flash bar can flash. I mean, the touch bar can flash. All kinds of reasons to explain the behavior in my computer that doesn't require the existence of those little monsters on their trampolines. It might be more fun sometimes, but fun isn't a theoretical virtue, at least yet. So when we get these powerful theories that have extra postulates in them, then we can strip some of those out because we don't need them. And a theory to explain the behavior of my touch bar that doesn't have the existence of monsters in them is really going to be a more elegant theory. It's simpler, it's easier to understand. Okay, so it's really pretty straightforward. I've got these little graphs here. I tried to make the colors match, and they're not perfect. But the problem is that power and simplicity are in conflict with one another. So if you look at the second bar there, so pink is power, white is simplicity. Again, this is a very simple and straightforward example. But if you increase the power of a theory, you decrease the simplicity of it. And if you increase the simplicity, then you decrease the power. Very, very simple theories don't explain that much. And if they don't explain all the data, then it's too simplistic. So I think you can see where we're headed with this. Power increases, simplicity decreases. The problem there is that while complex theories can tend to be more difficult to understand, explanations aren't our only goal. Monsters explain what they need to. Monsters in my computers explain everything, but explanation isn't our only goal. We want the simplest possible theories, and the ones that still explain all the data. So that, like I've just hinted at, what we really get is that this boils down to two things. humans have a finite ability to understand the content of a theory and process it. So we need simplicity out of it. We tend to like simplicity, and honestly, it's a requirement. Some theories get so complex that they can be really difficult to understand. The other is that, again, we aren't just interested in explanation. So merely the ability to explain phenomena is not enough. We need a balance of these two. One of my favorite philosophers, his view, I could go on for a while about his view. I think it is a genuinely interesting and very powerful view. And he has some things built into it that we would all probably find difficult to wrap our minds around and to get. But what he's done is he's built exactly what he's talking about here. Is he's built a theory that has, for his view, the right balance of power and simplicity. And so in this paper, A New Work for a Theory of Universals, he says a theory must be as simple as the axiomatization as it can be without sacrificing too much information content. And it must have as much information content as it can have without sacrificing too much simplicity. Now, this isn't a guide on how to build these theories like this. It's just a statement of what a theory ought to have. So this would be a quality that a theory can have. And the quality is that there's a balance of these two. The information theory that Lewis is talking about in this case is referring to the explanations that theories provide. So more information content equals more power, but too much information content equals a loss of simplicity. So Lewis is arguing here, or he's stating here that we need to have a balance between these two virtues. We want simple, elegant theories that provide complete explanations of the data. Okay, enough with the setup here. So the problem, by the way, this is my favorite slide of the entire thing, because you don't get a generalization that's any worse than it being everywhere. But this point is especially important. So the trade-off between power and simplicity shows up all over the place. And it especially shows up whenever there's an explanation needed. And I think we see it quite often in the current state of content. So I'm going to show you an example next that is software based. So while there is content being delivered, it's maybe not what we it's not what we would all typically think of as like technical documentation or content in that sense. It's content related to stock market. So this is a really powerful tool. So it's kind of difficult to see because it's the screenshot. Really, they jammed so much in here, but that's part of the point too. It's difficult to see everything that's going on in this, but this is a stock trading platform that's called Thinkorswim. It's by TD Ameritrade, and anybody that with a TD Ameritrade account can go download and connect their accounts to Thinkorswim, and you can start trading stock on here. It's incredibly powerful. It's essentially a professional grade trading platform that's available to anybody. It's full of graphs, charts, analysis tools, trends, news, and obviously the ability to trade. It has the ability to provide, you can link multiple accounts to it, and you can choose which account you want to use for particular transactions. It lets you set which type of orders you want to place, limits, stop losses. It gives you UIs that show all open orders. So not even just your open orders, but all the open orders on the market and what their price, their stop losses are, and when they'll buy and sell. And you have huge amounts of control over the UI. So this is actually, I configured the UI for myself to look like this. And, the list goes on and on for what you can do with it. It's incredibly powerful. It's not simple to use at all. The first time I opened it, I was overwhelmed, and I just thought, I don't have time to deal with this right now, and I closed it because there's so much going on. We can see similar trends in content creation tools as well. There are some really powerful tools out there, and they're more complicated to use. They're more complex. There's more going on. And some of that, they have to be. But we also get tools like this. This is Robinhood. We've kind of probably, at this point, I'm sure most of us have heard of Robinhood. It is a retail investor's application. And so you can see that this is for a single stock, in this case, Lucid Group. And you can see kind of a graph or a chart there of what it's been doing over the past day. And they give you day, week, month, 3 months, years, and 5 years. It provides you some level of information, but it has really limited capabilities. For example, you can't set all the same order types in Robinhood that you can in Thinkorswim. So they give you a limited number of types. You can have market orders, and I think you can have limit orders. And that's really about it. They don't let you do stop loss, I don't think. It has limited capabilities. The graphs and charts that are available are much more simplistic in here. Even their expanded charts are very, very simplistic by design, actually. You know, the creators of Robinhood looked at tools like Thinkorswim, and they wanted to make it simple. They wanted to make it accessible for people who have never traded before. And so they took everything they could and they boiled it down to what they thought was the most fundamental. And, you know, some features are required by law. And they provided a tool set that has just that stuff. So it was by design, but they lost some of the power of the more advanced tools. Some of this even boils down to how quickly your orders get in. Thinkorswim, the orders can be immediate, and they're not always immediate with Robinhood. But they targeted a particular audience and they built an application around that audience. And so they chose the simpler tool. Okay, so what's the real connection here to content? Well, here's the basic conundrum I see that we're in. Content consumers are expecting simpler and yet more unified content experiences. Our content consumers, and I should point out, I'm one of these people. I expect content. I expect to get it quickly. I expect to be able to access it in a variety of ways. I expect it to, for the most part, meet my needs wherever I am. And I assume that there are going to be multiple content types. The problem with that is when your consumers start expecting these very simple and unified content experiences, as content creators, we all know what's going on behind the scenes. The more varied your product lines or service offerings are, the more difficult that this conundrum becomes, because consumers don't care about the complexity that's required. They don't care about the complexity of your product lines, and they don't care about the complexity of the content that's behind the scenes that's required to meet their very simple yet unified experiences that we're wanting. So consumers are expecting simpler, faster access to complete content sets. So really the conundrum is to pull off content delivered in various formats and to various endpoints in a unified and simple way. Your content operations have to increase in their power, which means that the complexity is also going to drive upwards because we've got more going on that we have to do as content creators and people who are involved in content operations. But that, as you guys know, that drives down the simplicity. So the problem really boils down to content consumers are in effect demanding an increase in simplicity while at the same time implicitly demanding an increase in the power too. So that whole trade-off between power and simplicity, content consumers are telling us that that doesn't matter. And so they're demanding simpler experiences, faster experiences, which require more complexity, and they don't care. I don't want to put too much on them. I'm one of these people, so I get it. But the content conundrum is really worse than just complex content operations, because we have to hide the complexity from our content consumers. And that hiding of it adds another layer of complexity. So as the demand for simplicity in delivery and consumption goes up, that requires content creators and the tool builders to have to build in extra resources and methods to hide the complexity that's required to provide those simple and unified experiences. If consumers are only demanding PDFs, we could probably make do with, say simple text files that are styled and turned into PDF, and we deliver those. But that's not the way where people are demanding content these days, as I'm sure we all know. We're demanding content how I need it, when I need it, and in the means that I need it. So in effect, what's happening is content consumers are really pushing the complexity onto us, the content creators, and we have to deal with it. They, again, we demand simple and unified experiences, and we don't want to know about the complexity that's going on or the complexity required to pull off those experiences. So, and, you know, interestingly, I think that to some extent, COVID has amplified this. So here's one more quick example. During COVID, at the height of COVID for us, my family, we started using grocery pickup service. So this required, you know, ordering online with an app, and then you drive to the store, and then we wait in the car for somebody to come open up the back of the car and put the groceries in and deliver them. You know, it's a touchless service. This requires that these grocery stores or people that are running, you know, grocery services have an application that provides a clean UX and importantly has to work to have made contactless shopping possible. But if the apps don't deliver the product content that was formerly on a website in a mobile application for ordering food on the go, customers will move on to the next place that provides it. My wife did this. She tried to order from the closest grocery store to us. Their app was buggy. It didn't deliver. It was very difficult to navigate. And by very difficult, I mean, you know, keep in mind where we are with our current state of mobile apps. Most of them are relatively simple. This one had a little bit more complexity to it, and it had a couple of bugs, and that was enough for her to stop using it and move on to the next place, the place that had more resources to build those applications and provide that content in a very clean and unified way. So the complexity required to create a clean UX for grocery ordering it's really high. You've got to have a huge system in the background, not only an application that's incredibly powerful, you've got to have a content operation behind there as well that's powering all of the content that shows up there. And importantly, my wife never once, you know, thought to herself, and I didn't either, well, listen, what they're trying to do is really difficult, so cut them some slack. Nobody thinks that. We're not focused on that. Personally, I think that I never had this reaction, but really, if you think about all of us who are in, you know, the tech space, think about what's required to make something like a mobile application for grocery ordering, for curbside delivery. You know, if you think about everything that goes into it to make that work, really our proper response should just be like shock that it actually worked. But instead, we don't. We expect them to work. We expect them to work if they're out in the world, and we don't concern ourselves with what's required to build it. Okay, so given that customers are pushing the complexity issue off to the content creators and the application builders and still demanding these simplified experience for people, what's the solution? Like, where do we go with this? And this is where I think there's actually a bit of hope for all of us. And, you know, here's why. I think that to move forward with this and to overcome this, we're definitely going to get to the point where, and I might be, you know, talking to people who already agree with this, but semantic structured content is going to be a must. And we're going to have to deliver that content as a service. What does that mean? Structured content on demand. The structured content is going to provide the foundation for delivering this machine readable and thus very flexible content on demand to specific audiences when they need it. That means delivering this as a service is going to cause some changes to the way that we actually create the content. We're no longer going to be able to think about the content as a particular delivery format, and we're going to have to think about the content as merely the snippets of content and understand that they could be, those snippets and those pieces can be put together in any number of ways and delivered on demand. The good news is that as content creators, well, let me back up for just a bit. Structured content tooling really needs to become simpler too for content creators. So the structured content part of that first piece there is that while the tooling that we do have, a lot of it that we do is very, very powerful, the bar for entry is still pretty high. It takes a lot of training to understand some of these tools and methodologies for creating structured content. So if the structured content tooling can become simpler and thus more easy to use, then we can get more people involved. We can expand the companies who are doing content operations, and we can get more people that are creating structured content for these more complicated content operations. I think that APIs are going to be replacing traditional structured content publishing methodologies as part of that content as a service. As those demands both go up, then the push, I think, will be towards APIs for delivery. Okay, so the good news for content creators is that you guys can push the complexity of the tooling off to the tool providers. You can demand structured content in simpler and more streamlined UIs. So just like the customer, the content consumer themselves are pushing the complexity of what's required to build that content off to us as content creators, we as content creators can push some of that complexity problem off to the tooling, the tool vendors, the people who are building tools to create structured content. That doesn't negate the need for training, and it doesn't negate the need for expertise. Those are still really important. And some of that really is good news for us. So as we become more technical in our abilities and we understand content operations better and we implement those content operations better, our value to these companies that are creating content is going up. And companies, I think, again, due to some part in some sense due to COVID, a lot of companies are really starting to, some of the smaller companies are really starting to see the value in content, and they're delivering it and getting it out. Like I said, simpler tooling isn't going to eliminate the need for specific training and understanding of structured content and content as a service, but it does alleviate some of the difficulty of entry into this. So you might not have to become an expert with a particular tool, or really, be an expert in all of the structured content methodologies and markups, different markup languages, for example. That will never hurt. But I think good tooling and high quality APIs will enable your content teams to deliver that content to your consumers on their terms. Yeah, so like I said, this extra bit of good news is that this is more of an existential type of good news. So as the users demand simpler and more unified content experiences, the demand for content creators who understand structured content and API delivery or content as a service delivery, the demand for our organizations who are delivering content, the demand for the need for people who understand those things is also going to increase, because companies are going to start to realize that customers are pushing off that complexity to the content creators. So for those of us who work with tools and methods, that's really good news. And as that need drives up, and as companies recognize that need, which I think they are, the demand for people like us to pull these things off will go up. I want to leave a little bit of time for questions, and really that's it. I'm just kind of trying to set the stage for this and hopefully provide a little hope too. Thank you guys.
Okay, thank you, Jarod. Do we have any questions from the room? No, not many questions. One question is here. Okay, so the first question is, Jarod, can you hear me?
No.
Okay, do you happen to have the Slack channel available?
I do.
We sent? No. You said you don't hear me. I was asking the person who wanted to ask the question. But you hear me. Okay, so that's not a problem.
I do. I hear one person, yes.
Okay, awesome. So let's try with a question. I will probably give my microphone.
Hi to everybody. My name is Gabriel from Wrocław in Poland. Thank you very much for your very interesting presentation. We've been talking a lot about future content, yeah, how it's going to be managed. The debate, however, was quite theoretical. This is how I perceive it. It's not a point of critics, not at all. Still, I would like to ask you, I mean, I would like to see it from a practical point of view. Let's say, how can I, as a content creator, make sure that the choice I make, I mean, the choice between simplicity and power. I refer to the first concept you presented. How can I verify ex ante, not ex post, if the ratio will find acceptance among the new content consumers? You know, of course, in many cases, we find out if the choice was effective, the content was effective ex post. And I can imagine that managers, especially managers, wouldn't like to find that out ex post and to see or get presented some indications how the probability is that the choice is the right one.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think there needs to be a really, really high amount of research that goes into this. So some of it, there will be some research involved, and some of that could be as simple as you're surveying your content consumers to ask them what they might consider to be a high quality content experience. So what are the things that they're looking for out of a high quality content experience? So I think on the front end, to set ourselves up for this, we could do as much research as possible, given organizations and teams and all the resources available to us. Do as much research with customers as possible, asking them how they want that content. And that can then inform our decision-making process on how we're going to go about building a content operation that would meet those needs. I think you're right that we can find out after the fact whether people like the experience or not. But I think if we do some good research up front, we can gather enough information to start to deliver those experiences that people want. I think that there are a couple things. So I mentioned this, I mean, even on the slide that's still up right now, structured content tooling can become simpler for content creators, but kind of nestled in that is really the idea that we need structured content. We need structured content, and we need really efficient and powerful ways to deliver that content. If for no other reason, then it reduces the time that's required for the time and effort that's required for our content consumers to access it. You know, if we go back to the days of all Word documents and delivering content in some static format that's not searchable, it's not personalized, all of those things, I think research up to now has shown that those people are moving away from that kind of content experience. They're expecting a different experience now. So I think research is really the best way, consumer research. That's a good question.
Okay, do we have one more question we can allow ourselves or not? Okay, one more.
Hi, I'm Bálint from Budapest. You mentioned in your presentation that we as technical communicators could provide feedback for the companies that develop our authoring tools, and that might pressure them to develop simpler and more intuitive products. But don't you think that's a bit optimistic, so to say, because some of these companies, for example, Atlassian, they are the size of Microsoft, and they have a track record of not really caring about customer feedback.
Shame on them. I mean, I work for a company that's we try to be very customer focused, and we try to take that stuff seriously. If you're not, I mean, this is my opinion here. I'm not trying to tell Atlassian how to run their business. But if you're not listening to customer feedback, what are you doing? I mean, like, why would you not listen to what your customers want? Now, maybe they have ways of, so maybe their problem is is a perception problem where they're tracking how people are using the system. Again, I don't know what they're doing behind the scenes, but you could make the case that maybe they're tracking how people are using the system and they're making minor tweaks to the system based on how people are working and interacting. And they just give off the perception that they don't care about customer feedback. If that's what's happening, you know, shame on them, because that you should really be paying attention to it. If they're really not paying attention to customer feedback, then, I mean, that's even worse. You know, if a company's not going to listen to its customers, then at some point customers are they're going to get a bad taste in their mouth for that organization, and they'll start looking for other options. So I think the customer, so maybe it is a bit optimistic of me, but I think we can see this trend in some cases too. You do get some monolithic companies out there that may not care that much, but the trajectory that I've noticed seems to be that more and more companies are at least starting to care. So I hope I'm right about that. I hope. Maybe I'm just too optimistic.
Okay.
I can say this: if you give us feedback, we'll listen to it.
Okay, thank you for your questions, and thank you, Jarod, for your presentation.